Very inspirational. So I've entitled my more lighthearted inspirational forum address, A Time to Shine. I've been asked today to tell you a little bit about myself to hopefully inspire you in your current academic pursuits at SVU. And one of the most awe-inspiring moments I had in my education was when, after weeks of struggling with the statistical package software called R, and many failed attempts, I was able to recreate a phylogeny of baleen whales so that I could then make a phylogenetic correction to the sexual dimorphism of the 11 species that I had data for. And this is what it looks like. Ooh. Hey. Isn't that a thing of beauty? And I hope it leaves you inspired, as much as it did for me. But I'm sure you probably don't appreciate it as much as I do. So I'll try a couple other things to inspire you today. So, all right, so how about this? I'll tell you about the time that I analyzed stable isotope signatures to measure migration patterns of silver-haired bats. Okay? So, in order to do this, I had to hike through the woods, stay up all night to catch a flying mammal so that I could take some toenail clippings and analyze their isotope fractionation values to understand how far away they were migrating. According to my estimates, they may have traveled up to 1,000 miles to migrate to northern Alabama, where I caught them. So that sounds pretty inspiring as well, right? No. Okay. All right, so I got a few other tricks. Let's see here. Well, the last time I was asked to speak in front of a crowd of this size, or similar, was during freshman orientation when I had only been working here for a couple of weeks. And I performed a 2-minute lyrical performance about the biology major. And I've also recently been listening and dancing to the musical Hamilton soundtrack, especially the opening song, and I can't help but feel inspired by it. So for some reason, there seems to be nothing more inspiring than a hip-hop biographical lyrical tapestry of rhymes. And I could try that, but I couldn't find the time to rhyme. I couldn't find the time to rhyme, the conditions weren't prime, and that's fine, but I wonder if everything were aligned and kind, would I be able to put something together that shined? Well, maybe. Okay, I had a little bit of time to write. But I think my autobiographical rap will have to wait for another day. And I'm not sure how inspiring it will be either. But getting back to this idea of a time to shine. I know it sounds kind of cheesy, but just bear with me. If you could reflect for a minute on times in your life where you felt the need to be compelled to shine. The best times to rise up, make changes, be an example, elevate your game, or whatever fits the bill for you. I would say the times when it makes the biggest difference are the times when it's tough. The times when you're faced with a seemingly insurmountable challenge or challenges, which all seem to come down at the same time. And I know a lot of people think of college as this fun and happy and just great time in everyone's life. Everyone has such fond memories of their time in college, and I agree, it is a great time. But it can also be one of the hardest times of your life. You're in the midst of intense pressure, stress, expectations, responsibilities, relationships. You're breaking free from parental oversight. You're not constantly monitored like you were in high school in your academic success. And that can often be lonely, unfamiliar, and strange. Well, I guess the silver lining to the difficulties of college life is that it also gives you many opportunities to shine. So I wanted to tell you of an experience that I had when I was a college student, much like yourself, and I hope that you all can relate to it. So in January of 2003, I had just returned to school at BYU after coming back from serving a 2-year mission to Winnipeg, Canada, where our mission motto was, "Many are cold, but few are frozen." And I was very excited to be getting back into school after this 2-year Canadian immersion program. And I felt invigorated and refocused on taking classes in my major and succeeding academically. So I got to Provo, I started attending classes, making friends, I was active in my ward, I was trying to convince my ex-girlfriend that she still loved me, and I was settling right in. And the first few weeks of school went by. I was still going to classes and enjoying it, still trying to convince my ex-girlfriend that she loved me. And then the first round of exams came up, and when I took my exams, I didn't do that well. I didn't do well at all. You know, I was expecting and hoping for A's and B's, but I was getting D's and C's. And it was really deflating. And the worst part about it was I didn't understand why I wasn't doing well. I went to every class, I took notes. I was excited to be there, I thought the classes were interesting, I loved my professors, and I just wasn't getting good grades. I felt like my enthusiasm and my experience in class was positive, but it didn't match the outcome of my exams. And I'm sure many of you have maybe had a similar experience, where your enjoyment in the class didn't match necessarily your performance. So if hardships really are a great time to shine, then I felt like this was a time for me. I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. I felt very inspired and spiritually motivated and spiritually supported in these pursuits. And I knew that my education was going to be fundamental to that goal. And so I knew I needed to change something, but I didn't know exactly how to go about it. But fortunately, I made a few friends at this time, and one group of friends that I had were pre-med students. And when I started to hang out with them, I was very impressed with some of the things that they did. Especially academically. So some of the examples, they had a specific place in the library where they always went to study, and you could always find, you know, 2, sometimes 3 of them at a time in the same area. And they would spend hours a day there just studying. So beyond assignments, they were just like reading textbooks. And one of these friends, she had a goal sometimes to try and understand the material in the book better than her professor. She would pour over her textbook over and over, and she would just drill that information until she knew it like the front of her hand. And then for exams, they wouldn't just study a few hours the day before. They would study for hours daily, up to a week before, just for one exam. And they would study until they could explain it to each other in detail, as if they were the professor. And then they would also freely share the things they learned and talked about how interesting and cool those things were. And when I would ask them questions I had, they would explain it to me with this excitement in their eyes. And it was like the professor was there speaking to me. And then it dawned on me, they were nerds. They had fallen in love with a subject that wasn't of general interest, that wasn't necessarily popular. And that kind of made me take a step back. All these things made me take a step back. And I came to the realization that if I wanted to do well, if I wanted to achieve my goals academically, if I wanted to get A's in my classes, then I was going to have to do what they were doing. I was going to have to spend the time and do the work to learn the material, to learn the information. Another thing that I noticed about my friends is that these people were not geniuses. You know, if you didn't know them and just talked to them about biology, they sure would seem like geniuses, but I knew differently. I knew that they only knew this information because they put in the work to understand the material. And they weren't born that way. They didn't just automatically absorb the information, that they had to work at it. And so I took this opportunity to shine, and I followed their example, and I started studying intensely like I never had before. I started falling in love with the subject matter and making connections and explaining cool random facts to everyone around me. And guess what happened? And sure enough, I became a nerd. of biology. Many people would have described me as a nerd before that as well. Along with that, I started to get A's. I started to really love the material, to the point where taking a biology class wasn't a problem or a challenge for me. It was an opportunity, and it was something that I looked forward to. And I knew that the difference between a good and bad grade for me was the difference between casual understanding and actually learning. And that was the amount of time that I put into working. So through this experience and my experiences teaching, I've learned that I wasn't a genius, and for the most part, nobody is. This is a graphic I made. I call this the genius spectrum, patented. On one side you have your geniuses, on the other side you have your Homer Simpson types. And the fraction of us in college that are geniuses is quite small. But there's a test I've come up with that you can take if you want to know if you're a genius. I call this the genius test. Also patented. And it's very simple. In fact, I took this test. To take it, all you have to do is go to one of your classes, sit there, take notes, let the information pass over into your brain. And when it comes to time to study for an exam, just passively study, maybe go through your notes a couple times, have a book open while you watch TV, and then go in and take your test. And if you get an A, congratulations, you're a genius. And I've had students who appear to have this quality, that they, with very little effort, seem to know the information and understand the information at a higher level. And however, most people do not pass this test. And if you fail the genius test, as I did, it really doesn't matter, because in college, and especially at SVU, you do not need to be a genius. And many of you maybe have been told that you were smart for your whole life before you came to college, and that doesn't matter either. Because college, and especially SVU, is designed for you to succeed when you put in the time and the effort and develop a love for your learning. And I know there's variation in this. There'll be some subjects that will come easier to you than others which will be more difficult for you, and you'll have to work harder at. But by and large, if you have three things: first, the desire; second, are invested; and three, you understand the material as it's presented to you. It's not completely foreign. Then the last thing that you have to do is just put in the time. Put in the time to shine. Which is fine if you have that in mind. Even if the conditions aren't sublime, you'll find a way to meet the feet, to push, to grind, because sometimes life ain't kind. It's like casting pearls before the swine. When it's all we can do to keep our feet in line and scrub the grime, and the tears are clear but you're feeling blind, that then there is the time to shine. So, when you are feeling frustrated or hated or overall just way too deflated and faded, it's hard work that will leave you elevated and rated above where you've been slated, because being a genius is just overrated, and doing what they did has all gone and faded. It's not complicated, it's conflated and weighted. You can be elated if you just take the time to shine. Thank you.